Welcome to the Altitude Show. I'm your host, Dave Brinker. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Altitude Show. Today we have a special guest, Jack Carr. He's a friend of mine. He's a retired SEAL team leader, devoted family man, and most recently a New York Times best-selling author. There's so many things we can take from this guy, from his leadership skills to his life blazing a trail as a creative and entrepreneur. Our conversation went all over the place. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did and take something from it that you can improve your life with. Enjoy. The Altitude Show is brought to you by Peaks Equipment, the world's leading technical, hard goods, and accessories brand for backcountry enthusiasts. From trekking poles to headlamps to best-in-class gaiters, Peaks delivers a system of products that work to achieve optimal performance in the harshest conditions. Don't suffer on your hunting adventures. Peaks enables you to thrive on the mountain when everyone else is going home. Visit peaksequipment.com and use code ALTITUDE for 10% off today. That's ALTITUDE for 10% off on peaksequipment.com. Outdoor Class is the new source of premium outdoor education from trusted and knowledgeable experts. For hunters committed to improving their skills, Outdoor Class is the only subscription-based e-learning platform that provides unlimited access to video lessons from the world's most respected experts. Learn from industry leaders like Corey Jacobson, Randy Newberg, Remy Warren, and other experts across all the topics that affect you as a hunter. Make sure to follow Outdoor Class Official on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and take your game to the next level by going to outdoorclass.com. That's outdoorclass.com. Mr. Jack Carr, how are you doing today, buddy?
What's happening? Man, I love that you have a podcast that we can hang out for a little bit here.
I know. Like, how often do we get a chance or with anybody to sit and talk for like an hour and a half without distractions?
And I love the guitars in the background right there.
Yeah.
Probably people listening to your podcast know how talented you are as a songwriter and a musician. So I love that those are there. And you got the elk up there as well. Awesome. So, man, good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. I appreciate you coming on today. I know you're a busy man. I see all the books in the background, and you're like, I mean, it's not like your previous life wasn't busy enough. You decided to like not sit on a beach and sip cocktails. You decided to make another version of a busy life.
Well, it seems actually busier now for whatever reason. And I guess that sounds strange, but I was solely focused on, the task at hand in the SEAL teams, myself the best operator I could possibly be. But a lot of that happened at work, going into work to work out, going on a trip where you're shooting, where you're running through the drills or you're going through the kill house or whatever you're doing. And then at home, this reading has been a part of my life always. So I'm reading things about warfare and terrorism and insurgencies and counterinsurgencies and all that sort of thing. But it wasn't building a business. That business was already built. Like the SEAL teams were built. I'm a cog in that machine, and I'm trying to be the best cog I can possibly be. And that's what I owe the guys I'm taking down range. That's what I owe the mission. That's what I owe the guys' families. That's what I owe the country, and myself, to be the best version of myself as an operator that I can possibly be. But there's a difference, as you know, between doing that and then building something, building a company.
Well, I'm really curious. I'm really curious about that because I'm lucky because of my previous career too that I've got to know several SEALs, and one of the things that a couple of my SEAL friends have struggled with is getting into business after the SEAL teams, because you train so hard and become so razor focused on operating in that world. Yeah. It does. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things that come out of it: leadership skills, discipline, all those things. But how to actually build a business isn't actually one of them. So I'm curious. Like, did you have experience in business prior to doing that? I mean, I think you went straight in, didn't you, after school?
Yep. So no business experience whatsoever. And I didn't know I needed any because I never thought of myself as a business person, and I still don't. But now I think of myself as an entrepreneur for sure.
Yeah.
And that became clear to me very early on. But I didn't think about that. I just thought that I'm going to write. And I know that's where my passion lies. That's what I've been preparing myself for from a very early age by reading all these books growing up, continuing to read, having that be a part of my life, both fiction and non. And I didn't realize that as an author today, it is important to build a business because you're building a readership, and you can rely on maybe your publisher to do that for you. But the way you build something today is quite different than it was 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, in that it's much more personal, no matter what you're building, because of social media, because of the internet, because of podcasts, because of touch points that people have with you and those around you, and that they are now programmed to be drawn towards something that is authentic. If you have two things out there, two products, the one that is authentic will be the one that resonates with them the most, for the most part, just because of these social channels and what they've been programmed for over the last 20 years, 10 years. And that's becoming more important. But I thought I was going to come to the mountains. I was going to write a book. I was going to send it to New York. I was going to start the next book, maybe do an interview or two. That's it. And I did not realize that this is like any startup. And unless you're like a J.K. Rowling, or you write a book like 50 Shades of Grey or Twilight series, well, if you're not one of those people, or if you aren't already established from the 70s, 80s, 90s, like something like, let's say, a Stephen King or a John Grisham, that already has a readership, if you're building that readership from the ground up, word of mouth, well, you're going to have to figure things out, and you're going to have to engage, you're going to have to build, and you're going to have to look at things with that entrepreneurial type of an eye. You're going to have to adapt to a changing environment, capitalize on momentum, look for gaps in the industry and things that you can capitalize upon. So it's a little different today. And that became clear to me, I think, probably about a month before the first book came out. So in 2018, I just barely created a social media account on Instagram, was getting a website up and running, that sort of a thing. And then it became very clear after hearing other authors complain about what their publisher wasn't doing for them. And I thought, you know what, I'm never going to complain. They gave me my shot. Simon & Schuster, Atria, Emily Bessler Books, they gave me my shot. And now I'm going to prove to them that I was a good investment, and never complaining about anything. And I'm going to build this thing because today you can, with the tools that are available to you out there. So that was a long way of saying no background in business, but I did the same thing that I did on the battlefield. I looked at the space, and then I adapted, just like I would on the battlefield. Very few differences, other than, hey, if I test something here and it doesn't go quite right, guess what? I can change, and no one died. And so I can sleep on something. I'm not doing it so quickly. I'm not adapting every second on the battlefield as the enemy's doing the same thing to me in a firefight. So it's different, and but it's busy. It is a very busy to do that, to build something, as you know, and anybody that starts a business in their garage knows, and you have to go all in on it if you want it to succeed.
Yeah, I was really, really impressed with you. I met you years ago through a mutual friend of ours, Jonathan Hart. Prior to when you started writing, I think you were still, because when did you retire from the military?
2016. So I
Yeah.
mentioned 2 years before that. I knew you
I
for
think I met you in like 2008 or 2009, if I remember
yeah.
correctly. But I was really impressed when you came out with the first book. Like, as a marketer, I was like really, really impressed with how well you got the word out. Like you said, that word of mouth, building from the bottom up. I mean, even though you have this Simon and Schuster deal, a lot of musicians run into this too, Jack, where they get a record deal and they're like, I'm famous, I'm rich. It's like, well, that's like, from what I've heard, I've never had a record deal. And what I've watched, that's just the
You
beginning.
should, though, because your stuff is awesome.
Thank you, man. But that's just the beginning. They're investing a lot of money into you, but that doesn't mean that you just get to stop. You have to that's actually when you should start even pushing harder and harder and harder. And you went out, like, I remember the one thing that I noticed, everybody opening these nice, I think they're boxes with a book and maybe a knife. Am I thinking of this correctly?
Not a knife, but you probably think knife because I do so much with blades.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I saw, I didn't just look at publishing industry. I looked across industry, and I looked at, hey, why does Apple, why was it such a different experience opening my iPhone than it was opening my BlackBerry back in the day? Because as much thought went into that box and the design and the colors as went into the actual product itself. So
Mm-hmm.
that stood out to me. How does Red Bull launch a drink? Well, they do something. They don't just launch it. They do a whole campaign around it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, with a book, why would it be any different in publishing? I can take some of these lessons and apply them to publishing because I haven't seen authors do that before. And most are probably expecting their publisher to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I just took ownership of that. And the first box was like a cardboard box, but it was still cool. And people
Mm-hmm.
opened it and shared it on social channels and all that. And then
Mm-hmm.
with everything that I do, whether it's a book, I want to be the next one to be better than the last. I want to continue to grow as an author. And so the next one, awesome SKB case cut out with a coin, much more professional. And then the next one, this one that's coming out here for In the Blood, it's a new case. They just arrived the other day in the other room. So I'll start putting those together in the living room. But the point of them is to make it as easy as possible as you can for people who might want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make it there. Everyone's busy. So if
Right.
someone wants to help me, rather than hoping that they're going to get the book, take a picture of it, post it to their social channels, say that they like it, whatever. Well, now I've given them a reason to share something that's cool that you can't buy, and they can open it and share it, and I'm just trying to make it as easy as possible.
And I'm sure you're putting in like a handwritten note or something. And
Yeah, so I sign the books personally to
yep.
each one of those people, and then they get some cool stuff in there. They get a letter in there that I take a wax stamp with the cross tomahawks, and push that into it, and it's all in this cool looking box. But yeah, it's but at the base level, you have to have the product has to be top
Right.
notch.
Yep.
So that has to be there.
Yep.
Then you can choose how much you want to do other things that get the word out there about that product, because
Mm-hmm.
we might have these iPhones. They might be, maybe it's great, but if no one knows that it exists, then you don't have a company. You can't do, in my case, what I love to do, which is write. So I do those other things. One, to say thank you to people, and two, because I love learning new things and doing new things, and I can't not adapt. It's in the DNA, and then it's also from those 20 years in the military downrange doing it, because the consequences of not are dire.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how well that mindset transitions over into business. Like the intelligent approach to, like, you can plan all you want, but until you actually start executing and adapting, you don't actually know. And that's how business is. Like, someone told me one time, like, everybody loves building a nice pitch deck and a PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever you do, and it's like it's only as good as the paper it's written on, until you actually start like just trying things. But it also, if you start trying things and you don't adapt, then you're just gonna like it's not gonna be great. But to your point, your product is amazing, right? So it would probably be fine just to send the book out in like a FedEx envelope. Like, you'd probably still got a lot of love, and you'd be successful. But you're a lot more successful when you take just as much time with those extra little steps as you did with the book.
Those details matter,
Mm-hmm.
and they've always mattered to me. So anything that it's just natural. It'd be very unnatural for me not to do these things. So
Mm-hmm.
and it can be fun at the same time, and you can add a little bit of joy to somebody's day at the same time, because they're included and they get this cool thing and all of that. But whether it's the products on the merch side, or it's the podcast, or it's the book, or a social media post, like, as much thought goes into any line that I write on for Instagram as it does for the book, or as much thought goes into design of the hat or a t-shirt on online as goes into anything else. Because that time, people are trusting you with time today, and they're not getting back. And there's so many distractions out there. So I'm very cognizant of the fact that someone is trusting me with something they're never getting back. And I take that responsibility quite seriously.
Yeah. So I imagine there was some rejection you had to deal with in the beginning, though, because I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the business, right? Did your sort of your mindset from the SEAL teams help at all in that initial phase of creating something creative, or being creative and creating a product, and then going out and just fucking figuring it out?
Yeah, so this is a tough one to answer because, well, I wrote a new foreword to the Terminal List that comes out around the same time. It comes out in June, and the original book came out in 2018. But there's a new foreword that's going along with a new hardcover that's launching right before the Chris Pratt series comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, I talk about this exact thing, that journey. Like, how did the book come to be? How did
Mm-hmm.
this series come to be? Because when you talk to people, they love to tell you the odds of getting a book published, one or two, on the New York Times list anywhere, let alone number one, and then getting that book turned into a Hollywood project that's
Mm-hmm.
actually coming to a screen with an A-list star and director. They
Mm-hmm.
love to think about how hard that is. I never thought about that for 1 second, other than it's difficult. Boom. Kind of like with SEAL training, 80% of people are going to quit. Okay, guess how much thought I gave that? The time it took to say that is how much time I gave that, because I knew I was going to be in that 20%. And how was I going to be there? I was going to prepare myself as much as I possibly could for that experience. And I was going to be in that 20%. So wanting to do that from such an early age, and then also wanting to write these thrillers from an early age, and studying these authors from the perspective of a fan. Not that I was like, what structure did Tom Clancy use here to make this a success? No, I was just enjoying it, the magic of the book. Same thing with David Morrell and AJ Quinnell and JC Pollock and Mark Golden, all these guys that I read growing up. I didn't look at those as like, I'm going to do this the same. I'm going to look at that. No, I was just a reader and a fan, and it was very natural for me to take in what I liked, what I didn't, what worked, what didn't, what I was going to do later on in life. So for me, that was that foundation upon which to build everything else. So it never entered my mind that I wouldn't get a New York publisher, that it wouldn't make the New York Times list, that I wouldn't be optioned by an A-list star, the exact person actually that I wanted to star in it.
Oh, no way. That's crazy.
It is so crazy because as I was writing it, I had no connection to Hollywood, no connection to New York publishing. I was just writing the best novel that I possibly could. And at the time, Chris Pratt was in Parks and Rec, and he had a very small role in Zero Dark 30 about the Bin Laden raid. And I saw that transformation from Andy Dwyer on Parks and Rec to the character that he played in Zero Dark 30. And I thought,
Right.
this guy, so well before Guardians of the Galaxy, well before his rise to A-list prominence, well before Jurassic World, Avengers, all that sort of a thing. I said, Chris Pratt's going to play this role. Not my character is Chris Pratt, but Chris Pratt is going to play this character because I need someone that is likable. I need someone who's at that point in their career where they need to take a risk, like Tom Hanks did after doing all the comedies in the 80s. Well, he takes a risk with Philadelphia in the early 90s, and then he writes his own ticket. And I think Chris Pratt is the guy. That is the person. But I had no connection to him. And then I thought, Antoine Fuqua, he's going to direct. Antoine is obviously.
Dude, I love your mindset, man. God, there's so many questions I have for you on this. Is like, because the wisdom that I mean, it's natural for you, but there's so many people out there that struggle with like 10 things that you just said. Like, it's just a total mind block for them.
Yeah, I mean, you have one shot at life. Like, you don't get a redo. You get one ride, and you get to choose how you're going to live that life, and how you're going to influence those around you, and what you're going to pass on and leave once you're gone, as far as a legacy to your kids or anybody in your circle of influence. But then same thing with publisher. I went to the back of books that I liked, particularly Vince Flynn and Brad Thor, and I saw them thanking someone named Emily Bessler. And I said, oh, why are they thanking this Emily Bessler person? Oh, she has her own imprint. Oh, it's Atria. Simon and Schuster. Okay, she's going to be my publisher and editor. And that's all the thought that I gave to that. And then I had a few definitely breaks, but it's interesting that you have to be prepared for when that door cracks for you. And if you are not prepared when that door cracks and someone takes the time to crack it for you, you're not ready to kick it in, you've lost. You have to put in that work at that base level. Without it, you don't get to that next level. You don't get where you want to go. And if you don't do that work, I can guarantee you're not getting there. But even if you do the work, can't guarantee you're going to get there, but you're prepared. And in my case, a friend from the SEAL teams that I knew, he knew me mostly by reputation in the SEAL teams, which is our currency in special operations. But he reached out to me and said, hey man, I heard you're writing a book. And I was still in the military. And I was about 4 months into writing that first book. And he said, hey, our mutual friend told me that you're writing something and you're getting out of the military in about a year or two. And he's like, hey, do you want to talk to Brad Thor, who's an author in the genre? And I was like, oh man, yeah, would he talk to me? That'd be great. And he said, yeah, I helped him out with a couple of books on the SEAL specific stuff. And he kind of owes me one, and I'll set up a call. And I said, wow, amazing. So I remember exactly where I was up in LA in my Land Cruiser, engine off because it's so loud, windows rolled up so I could minimize the sound from outside, baking in the heat. And I had this call with Brad Thor. I still have the legal pads, sweat all over it from and I was, it was like a job interview. He wanted to make sure that I was writing for the right reasons, and I told him, same things we've been talking about here. And he's like, hey, okay, stop talking. And now I know how many people tell you they want to write a book when you're an author. I didn't know back then, but he told me, hey, I'm not going to help you as you go through this process. I'm not going to give you any advice. Don't send me any chapters. Don't send me the book. But if you write this as a thank you for what your friend told me that you did in the SEAL teams, as a thank you for that, I can let Simon & Schuster know it's coming. Can't guarantee that they're going to open the package when it gets there. Can't guarantee they'll read one word. Definitely can't guarantee they're going to like it. But I can do that for you. And I was like,
Wow.
That's all I need. And he said, when's it going to be done? And I said, a year from today. And he said, okay, call me back then. So a year later to the day, I called him back and said, it's done. And this is really cool. He was like, well, is it done or is it as good as it can possibly be? And I was like, well, I kind of came skidding in here under the wire.
Right.
Get this done. I could probably spend a little more time with it and do some editing. And he said, okay, call me back when it's as good as it can possibly be. So I spent another 4 months with it or so, and just read it and reread it and edited it and had my red pen out right here. The red pen I use today, or the same similar type anyway. And got it as good as I could possibly get it, knowing that if I spent the next 40 years on it, it would get better by a degree. But it wasn't worth spending the next 40 years to get that degree. So I got
Yeah,
to
I was
that.
going to ask you, how do you know when it's done?
Well, now because I have deadlines, but back then it was getting it to that point that's very subjective. And I just thought in my head, hey, I'm going to get this to the point where it's as good as I can possibly get it, but knowing, you're always going to get better if you keep working on it, but that I can also do that for the rest of my life and never submit it. And I think probably some of the best things ever written are probably on somebody's hard drive or, on a stack of papers in their drawer next to their bed. So I got it to that point and called him back 4 months later and said, it's as good as I can possibly get it. And he said, all right, I'll let him know. And so I printed it. Throughout the course of our couple conversations, I had written down the exact font that Emily Bessler liked, the spacing that she liked, the way she liked to read everything. And then that's the way I printed it out. And I sent it to New York, attention Emily Bessler, Simon & Schuster, Avenue of the Americas. And it made it to her desk and she opened it and she read it and she loved it. And then she called Brad and she was like, Brad thought that she was just going to like read a couple of words and be like, because that's what usually happens. But instead, she loved it. And she calls Brad and says, hey, what do you want me to do here? I love this thing. I want to publish it. And he was like, hey, I want you to publish Jack. And
wow.
instead of like, let it go to another publisher or, competition or anything like that, like he was, then he called me and he said, dude, you've been struck by lightning. And I was on a hunt. Actually, I was in Texas, side of the road, thunderstorm, coming back from a hunt in Red River County up there on the Oklahoma border. And I saw Brad Thor pop up on my phone and pulled over to the side and answered that call. And that's when he told me I've been struck by lightning in a thunder and lightning storm. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm in New York having lunch with Emily, and then it's off to the races from there. So that was a break. But the point of that, and a lot of people will look at that story and say, oh, so lucky. Yes, yeah, I'll take it. I'll take the luck part. But that product has to be great. And also Johnny Sanchez, my friend from the SEAL teams, had to want to risk his political capital with someone to make that introduction.
Right.
And had I not had the reputation that I did in the SEAL teams for whatever reason, then maybe he wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that. He's not going to do that for just anybody. So there's that side to it as well. And then I'm going to keep going here because it comes full circle again with a friend from the SEAL teams who was getting out. And so I knew him in the SEAL teams. So 5 years later, he calls me. My first book is coming out in a few months. So he calls me in January of 2017. And he says, hey man, dude, do you remember me? And I said, yeah, Jared, how's it going? And he said, well, it's going great. But I wanted to ask you if you remember what you did for me in the teams. And I said, nope. And he said, well, as I was getting out, you're the only person who sat me down in your office, talked about transitioning out of the military. You introduced me to people in the private sector. And I've always wanted to say thank you to you. And I was like,
oh, wow.
no problem. And he said, yeah, so-and-so told me you had a book coming out. And I said, yeah, it's coming out here in a few months. I can send you a rough draft copy and a galley copy, which is an early edition for reviewers and that sort of a thing, kind of a rough draft. And he said, yeah, I'd like that, but I'd like to give it to a friend of mine. And I was like, hey, who's that? And he said, Chris Pratt. It's like, oh, that's interesting, because I thought of Chris Pratt playing this role. And
Right.
at the same time, another friend had given a Mark Owen, who wrote No Easy Day, who was on the Bin Laden raid. He had given a talk, and in the audience was Antoine Fuqua. And they struck up a friendship, and Mark Owen helped him on Equalizer 2. And then he gave Antoine a copy of my first book as well, around the same time that Chris got it. And they both wanted it. So the director that I wanted and the star that I wanted both wanted it at the same time. And then they eventually called each other and said, let's work on this together. And now all three of us are executive producers on The Terminal List, which is coming out July 1st from Amazon Prime Video.
I've
But
so
had I
many.
not sat down with Jared, had I not taken that time, there's no way this thing would be coming to Amazon Prime Video in July.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah, but what a great lesson in. I saw a quote today and I actually posted it on my Instagram this morning because I liked it so much, from another interview that you did, that said something like, "Don't focus too much on the odds. While you're doing that, someone else is actually doing it." Something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Never pay attention to the odds, because it's taking up bandwidth. It's taking up bandwidth in your
Yeah, I
head.
had bandwidth in it. That's correct. Yeah.
So it's taking up however much that is, however much space you're letting it take up, well, guess what? That's bandwidth. It's not focused on getting you where you want to go. It's not focused on making that book the best it can possibly be, or your product the best it can possibly be. And that's where you need to, especially when you want to do some of these things like in special operations or publishing or a film, that script has to be the best it can possibly be. That book has to be the best. You have to be in the best shape you can possibly be for the SEAL teams. You have to be a student of warfare that never stops. So all of those things, if you're worried about how hard it is to get through buds, well, that's taking up space that's not focused on being out there and doing those pull-ups and doing those sprints and preparing yourself mentally for what's about to come. So it's never pay attention to those odds.
I see you post all the time about history and about war history specifically, and I noticed it even more because my son's obsessed with World War I and World War II history, and he's 9, and he knows more about it than I do. So I feel like a total loser, but I've been learning a lot lately about it. But what drove you to be so interested in history? I think that's something that and in your childhood you were interested in obviously where you wanted to be a Navy SEAL and you wanted to be an author, and look at you today. That's pretty cool. Not very many kids have any not many adults know what they want to do. Like where do you think that came from?
Well, the military one, I think, was just innate. It was just in my DNA. And then that was kind of had a little spark early on, just knowing that my grandfather was killed in World War II, having his maps from, he was a Corsair pilot, which is the plane with the gull wings that folded up on aircraft carriers. There was a show back in the day called Black Sheep Squadron. Actually started out, I think, as Baba Black Sheep, and they changed it in syndication to Black Sheep Squadron, about Pappy Boynton, played by Robert Conrad in that series. And I would watch that with my dad, and that was his touch point with his father, because he was killed before my dad ever met him when it was World War II. And so we had this touch point with that generation through that show. So that goes to show the power of popular culture. But it was already in me. It was already there. Like I knew I was going to serve my country in the military. But then I had this touch point with my grandfather with the silk maps that they gave aviators back then. And we had those. We had his wings. We had his medals, pictures of him and his squadron with black and white photos. And then I was just drawn towards movies about World War II. And typically they'd be on like Sunday afternoons on that fourth channel. You know, there was ABC, CBS, NBC, and then the one outlier that was always playing a war movie on Sundays. And so I'd watch those. I'd go up and between football and during commercials, when my dad was watching football, I'd go up and turn that channel. And one of those times I saw something called The Frogmen. And I saw these guys, black and white films, swimming up over a beach and putting explosives on obstacles. And I asked my dad who these guys were, and he said the Frogmen. And I started pestering him more, and then football came back on, and I had to go ask. He said, "Go ask your mother. Go bother your mom." And so I asked my mom, and she was a librarian, and so we grew up with this books everywhere and a love of reading. Reading was as natural as sitting down at dinner or exercising or sleeping. It was just a natural part of life. And so we went to the library and started researching what SEALs were. And I just knew, okay, I think my first takeaways were from that research trip at age 7 to the library was that, hey, SEALs are some of the best special operators in the world, and the training is some of the toughest ever devised by a modern military. So whether that's true or not to a 7-year-old, that's impactful. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And then about a few years later, I started reading the same books that my parents were reading. So reading the Tom Clancy's and David Morrell's and Nelson DeMille's and the books that were on their shelves. And typically in the 80s, true in TV, true in movies, and in fiction, that the protagonists, the main characters, often had backgrounds in Vietnam as Navy SEALs, as Army Special Forces, as Marine snipers, as CIA paramilitary guys. So back then, before the internet, I'm thinking, hey, these authors have done some research into these protagonists, into the backgrounds of their protagonists, into SEALs and Marine snipers and Army Special Forces and CIA stuff. And so I just naturally gravitated to those books and loved them and have such fond memories of reading those books back when I was a kid. And that's what I'm trying to capture today, is that same kind of magic. And I think anything with art, as you know, from writing songs, and it doesn't matter what it is, what differentiates something that's good from something that's great is heart. And that's something that you can't really place your finger on. You can't write a book about it. You don't know what it is because it's so natural. And that's what really differentiates the good from the great, is something that has heart.
Yeah, it's like magic is the best word that I can think of. You just said it with songwriting, or it sounds like writing the books too. We talked a little bit in Salt Lake when I saw you about your creative process, and I was very envious of it, because part of it has to do with like escaping to somewhere for an amount of time where you're not distracted. And in the early days when you were writing, you did it late at night, it sounds like, which I could not do that because I need sleep. But now you go to these places, whether it's out in the woods or wherever, it's just distraction free writing time for up to a week or two. Is that true?
Yeah, this last one for a little longer than that, just because there's so many other things happening with the show and working on the scripts and being on set and then editing and post-production. There was so much going on. But yeah, it doesn't matter. I don't need a view. I don't need anything like that. I just need quiet. So the first one, when I was still in the military, it was written really between 10 a.m. and 3 a.m. Or sorry, 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. because that's when the rest of the house went to bed. And I got to just be in this little office off our bedroom, and a curtain, not even a door to that office. And then I just work. And because that's when I wasn't being interrupted. And then this last one, well, when we first got to Park City, then when we moved from San Diego, from Coronado, and came out here to start this next chapter in life, I started going to the library because I had a wonderful office in the new house, and it was beautiful, books, my gun safe, like it was awesome. But guess what? It was also off the bedroom, off the main living room, which has the kitchen attached. And it was like, as soon as you close those doors, and parents will understand what I mean here, it becomes like a magnet for children.
Yes.
So once again, I was writing so late at night on those things. I was still trying to get up and work out and stay in some semblance of shape, which is now kind of fallen by the wayside here. But so I did that for a while, and then I started going to the local library, and they have these little rooms that you could use for like 2 hours at a time. But typically, I could spend most of the day locked in one of these little tiny rooms just working until I got bumped by some high school student working on a history project after the high school got out. So I did that for the longest time, and then those shut down for COVID. So this last one, I started renting Airbnbs in town and or outside of town, just where I could go, and just a small log cabin where everything's right there. You don't have to go down a bunch of steps or walk to the other side of the house or whatever. It's having everything right there. A little wood burning stove where I was just chopping wood, throwing it in there, just feeding that fire as I worked at night. But the kitchen is right there, a little deck is right there, a little table is right there, the bedroom is there, bathroom is there, so a bunch of wood outside, all within a very small area. And that just makes it so efficient, because I'm writing, get hungry, I go into the kitchen to make a sandwich or warm something up or whatever it is. I'm still thinking about what I was just doing, just taking a breath for a second as I do that. And if you do that at home, well, guess what? When you come down from your office at home and someone in the family sees that you're not physically typing, guess what? Well, now it's time to, hey, this, and now you're interrupted, but you're still working when you're not physically typing. So it really helps to go somewhere where those interruptions are non-existent, or at least at a minimum.
Yeah, I found with songs, unfortunately, most of the time I get melodies stuck in my head or like a lyric, is right at the most inopportune time. Like I'm with my kids or we're having dinner or even in the middle of the night when I really don't want to get up out of bed and write it down.
Yeah.
But like
Got
you,
it.
you can't choose. You can't choose when these things come, man.
Yeah, people ask me about writer's block, and I don't have the luxury of being able to have writer's block. I've never had that luxury. There's so much going on, you just got
Yeah.
to do it. And I took it from Stephen Pressfield. He used to say, "Hey, you've never heard of a truck driver have trucker's block or a dentist
Mm-hmm.
having dentist block? No, you get in there and you work. You're professional.
Mm-hmm.
You're a writer.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you do." So when I sit down, I write, and that's just how it is.
And that doesn't mean that everything that comes out is brilliant. I mean, is that true? I've never written a book. I'm going to, but there's a lot of words in there. I mean, the chances are, if it's anything like songwriting, that a lot of garbage comes out, and then some gold nuggets fall out, and you kind of throw away the garbage and polish the gold nuggets. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, I mean, very few things get edited all the way out. They get morphed in my case.
Okay.
That's how it's been thus far. But sometimes a paragraph will come out or a sentence will come out, that sort of a thing. But mostly they're morphed.
Mm,
And so I get it out there, stories out there. As things progress, things develop. And even though I have an outline and I know where I'm going, I still don't know the characters. I know so and so Secret Service agent, so and so president, so and so. If a recurring character, obviously I know
mm,
them. But those newer characters, I don't really get to know them until they start interacting with the other characters in the book,
mm,
and that's when they more fully develop as characters, which is the most one of the most important parts in writing is that character development.
mm,
Uh, so I do that, but I know where I'm going. But as things develop, well, it changes. So if something changes
right.
in chapter 63 because it's developed because of a relationship or something happens or something more fully develops in the
Mm,
plot, now I have to go back and kind of fix it or may have it make sense that things
right.
ended up that way. So you got to go back and find all the places where you mentioned something before
Mm-hmm.
and polish it up that way. So
Mm-hmm.
it's but I love every part of the process. I love coming up with the title. I love coming up with the outline, the executive summary. I love writing the book. Then I love going back and editing the book. So I love doing all those things. It's yeah, I feel very fortunate that
And then do you come up with the title in your outline, or is the title something that you let kind of naturally come at the end?
I do. I come up with it right away because once again, I don't want it taking up bandwidth in my head as I'm writing. I don't want to be
Mm,
typing away and thinking, "Oh man, I've got to come up with a good title for this." I don't want that in there. I don't want that in the calculus. I want all my
mm-hmm.
effort focused on making this the best book it can possibly be.
Mm-hmm.
So thus far, I've come up with all the titles early on. Savage Son had a different title earlier on, but then I changed that. That just happened naturally. So they all starting off have a title: Terminalist, True Believer, Savage Son, Devil's Hand, In the Blood. Very early on. That's a part, just like that one-page executive summary or that outline. That's the time when I'm putting. It doesn't just say book 6; it has the title, and book 6 has a title that's classified right now.
What you seem like a very positive person, and you seem optimistic, and you kind of just you set a goal and you just go fucking do it. Um, the and that part I get, but your optimism and your positivity. Some of the SEALs that I met struggle with that coming back into the real world. You know, whether it's PTSD or just kind of a little bit of depression and like kind of recalibrating life. Like, what do I do now? Like, how did you move past that coming out of such a long career in the teams?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been this way. I still have friends from kindergarten and actually preschool that tell me you're exactly the same today as we remember you back then. And I just maintained some of those friendships for my entire life. But I've just always been this way. I think I had very powerful female role models in my life, which also translated over to the books, which wasn't intentional. It was just very natural. But I did
Mm,
think helped when I got to Simon and Schuster when you have a lot of publishing that's predominantly female, especially when I'm looking around. And I didn't mean to do that, but it just naturally happened.
mm-hmm,
But those same female role models were very positive. They'd been
mm,
through a lot with the Depression and World War II,
mm-hmm,
in my great grandmother's case, World War One. So they'd been through a lot. They had been tested in life, and they still remained positive about everything and passing on those stories and passing on
yeah.
those lessons and all that. So it's just a natural way
Oh.
for me to be, I think. And then my parents were always very encouraging, no matter what I wanted to do. I think they thought I'd grow out of wanting to join the military. I think
Hmm.
most parents think their kids that say they want to be astronauts or police officers or firefighters or military, think they'll grow out of it at some point. But they were always very encouraging as far as all that stuff goes.
Hmm.
And so I think that plays a role. I didn't expect the military to be a smooth ride. I've been studying warfare my entire life. So I think there's a little bit of maybe pre-inoculation there just through study
Hmm.
and awareness. And then I also got very lucky downrange in that the decisions I made under fire worked out. And
Hmm.
yeah, even if you make all the quote unquote right decisions under fire, things can still go south in a heartbeat because
Sure.
that enemy gets a vote. The Murphy's Law, of course, comes into play.
Hmm.
There's so many things that can happen down there that I think even if you make all the right decisions and something goes south, you can still struggle with it when you get back and just
Mm.
ask that questions. If only I'd done this differently, or if only
Right.
I'd made this decision, or if only we'd been more prepared, or whatever it is. And so I do feel very fortunate that for whatever reason, right or wrong, because you can make the wrong decisions too and end up
Right.
fine. That's the other side of
Right.
that. You make the right decisions, quote unquote, right decisions, things can go south. You make the totally wrong decisions. If we were
Hmm.
here planning a mission and we would say, well, you never do this. And then in real life, you did that and
Hmm.
everybody came home. So it works both ways. But so for whatever reason, the things that I did under fire worked out. And so I don't struggle with that, but I understand how one could,
Hmm.
especially if things go south, even if they make all the right decisions.
Hmm.
Because it's so easy for things to go south in that kind of a dynamic environment. But I think all that played, and also I knew exactly what I wanted to do next. I knew my time in the teams was coming to an end, and it was time to turn the page, and it was time to go after that next goal. And luckily, I'd prepared myself for it my entire life. And I also got to bring in, and I didn't really know this at the outset, but became clear very shortly after I started writing, almost from that first sentence, in that these books were going to be very personal. There was going to be a lot of the emotions and the feelings behind certain events downrange that were going to get woven in to the storyline, and that added to the authenticity piece. And once again, that was just all very natural. It wasn't part of some grand plan or anything. It just comes from knowing what I wanted to do, doing it, preparing myself, and finding that next mission in life, which is taking care of my family, and then that passion in life, which is writing, and putting those two together as I left the military, and not having to think about, oh, what should I do next? Should I go
Hmm.
get into finance, or
Hmm.
should I start a business? What kind of business would that be? Maybe I'll contract for a little bit as I figure things out. No, I never ever thought of any of those
Right.
things. Had a couple of contingency plans because you have to.
Right.
That makes sense, but I didn't put that much thought or energy or effort into them,
Hmm.
and that allowed me to put all my energy and effort into what I love, which is the writing. So
Do you spend any do you, I'm sure you still have a lot of friends from the teams. Do you have people reach out to you from the teams that are getting out asking for advice on how to set up their next life?
Yeah, and people, a lot of them ask kind of what you did. Like, how did you know you wanted to do this? That sort of a thing, or can I introduce them to somebody, or whatever else?
Hmm.
But yeah, they do reach out, and as they're getting out, fairly typically, or my peer group is mostly out now,
Yeah.
unless they're like a, I don't know, captain or an admiral or something, or
Right.
master chief. But a lot of my peer group is on the outside right now, and people remember what you did in the teams. Yeah, you have this reputation, and it's going to stick with you, and it is cool to see everybody helping each other on the outside. But probably not going to help somebody that didn't step up to do the job downrange, type of a thing, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Well, it's also got to be therapeutic for you to write about it.
It
Like,
is it is
because
very.
that's part of the problem with regret or anything like that is it most people don't talk, especially dudes. They don't talk about it with anybody, and it kind of just sits there and festers in their mind and their heart. And but even though you're writing, it's not necessarily a true story. There's a lot of true elements to it, like you said, that authenticity that maybe helps you work out things in your mind.
Oh yeah. There's there's a lot in there, and it became a very therapeutic process, and it continues to be so today. Even just when I
Mm,
look at the state of the country, or how we left Afghanistan, or what the enemy
mhm,
might be learning by certain actions, I weave all of those sorts of things into the novels, which allows me to vent in a way
mhm.
that isn't complaining, isn't whining, is turning it into a positive, and
Yeah.
allow to explore it from a bunch of different perspectives. And I think that's a healthy way for me anyway, to handle that sort of thing.
How did you feel about how we left Afghanistan? Because you obviously, that was right in your time. I'm sure, I don't know where you've been and all that, but
Yeah, I wrote. I was on. I guess for like a month. I was on a bunch of different TV shows, a bunch of
right.
different video, a bunch of different podcasts. A lot of people wanted to talk about it. So, and I was, of course, going to talk about it. I wrote an article about it.
Mhm.
Uh, a couple articles about it actually. But I mean, it's just so sad to know. We have the saying in the teams: "Don't rush to your death," which is like, don't run down this hallway and burst into this room and
Mhm.
run right into like a PKM that's barricaded in the corner, set up to crush.
Mhm.
So we had all this time. We had 20 years essentially to prepare to leave that country.
Mhm.
We could look back on our 20-year experience. We could go back and look at the Soviet experience from 79 to 89. We could have gone back at the beginning of the conflict, looked at that, and gone back to the 3 British incursions in the 1800s, early 1900s.
Mhm.
We could have looked at all of those things and then applied those experiences to our own as wisdom going forward. And we did not do that time and time again. We made mistake after mistake. And there's a great book called The Afghanistan Papers. Craig Whitlock had him on the podcast. And there he got a series of what were at one point classified interviews from senior level military leaders, senior level government officials, that juxtaposed what they said privately in these interviews to what they told the Congress, to what they told the troops,
Mm.
and to what they told the American public. And it's a fascinating read. It's heartbreaking, because you see early on how they're lying. And I'm not just assuming that they're lying because of the way things spell out. It's in their own words.
Right.
It's here in what they thought was classified. Here, what they're telling Congress. And you
Yeah.
can take these guys year after year and listen to them, and they say the same things: just need more troops, just need more funding. Here we go. Now we're going to shift focus and look at this drug problem and the poppy eradication. And now we're going to do this, and we're going to build this government up. And it just one thing after another, to the detriment of those people on the front lines giving their lives.
I mean, to a moron that obviously I read the news. I try to read it from multiple sources every day, so I keep up on this stuff. But from my point of view, it just seemed totally political the way it all happened. And like, hey, I made this promise, therefore I must do now if I want to get reelected with my people. That's the
Yeah.
way it felt. I don't know how. That's probably very unsophisticated of me. That's the way it felt.
There was certainly mistake after mistake after mistake. We had an opportunity early on, December of 2001, to get Bin Laden in the mountains of Tora Bora, and request from the guys on the ground, "Hey, we need 10th Mountain. We need an element of Rangers. We need Marines here to cut off these escape routes." And those requests were denied. We took the wrong. Our senior level leaders, who we trust with making those kinds of decisions, took the wrong lessons from the Soviets, and that really
What
spiraled.
were those lessons? I'm not. What mistakes? The main mistakes did the Soviets make when they did it?
So what we took from the Soviet experience was that they went in there and, with way too many people, set essentially giving the enemy, the insurgency, all these different targets. They got mirrored down in what we eventually got bogged down in as well, which is an insurgency. And so they wanted to keep the footprint very light.
Mm,
But that light footprint, yes, understand. But also, you have to adapt. You have to
right.
take the right lessons from the past and apply them going forward. So we took the wrong lesson right there, when we could have just gone in with overwhelming force into those mountains, cut off those escape routes. Instead, I think we had, and people can fact check me, it's been a while since I looked at the exact numbers, but it was like 100 special operators and CIA paramilitary guys on the ground, with a couple host nation elements as well. And that's when Bin Laden slipped away. So it could have been a different next 20 years had we taken the right lessons, and had we resourced those elements
From their
appropriate.
point of view, why did they make that decision? What was the rationale? Is that, I mean, it has to have come out by now, right?
Yeah, I think they just didn't want to have that Soviet experience of having to leave in disgrace 10 years later.
Mm,
So instead, we did it 20 years later.
mm,
But and our troops numbers swelled to well past, I think, well past what the Soviets had, but certainly well past the numbers that we had in there in December 2001.
right.
We ended up just by by default ending up in a very similar situation to what the Soviets did, what they were trying to avoid. And I always think, hey, these senior level people, they're doing things, I think, for the right reasons.
Right.
You have to think that
Yeah.
because the alternative is is not that great. But
Right.
at the
Right.
same time, what we would have been fired for at the tactical level, mistakes
Mm,
at the tactical level that we would have certainly have been fired for, held accountable for,
mm,
sent home for. Senior level leaders failed up time and time again over those 20 years, continued to fail up. The only senior level military leader held accountable for anything was someone who voiced some concerns. And I think 2009 timeframe, 2010 timeframe maybe, but it's in the Afghanistan Papers book. And then a few months later, after voicing those concerns, he was quietly removed. And no one else really has been held accountable for some of these decisions and some of these very obvious decisions, like when we leave Afghanistan and we give up Bagram. Okay, we gave up. So we put our tactical level soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines in a tactically disadvantageous position.
mm,
And you didn't have to have any sort of military schooling, any understanding of military history to look at that and say, hey, wait a sec, why did we do that? Why are we putting these people a bunch together at this gate in Kabul at this airport? That doesn't seem to make that much sense when we have
right.
this base that we've had for 20 years that's not that far away, that has standoff distance. That seems to make more sense. And that's why people were so upset. And of course, the media is not talking about any of it anymore. Just,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's very,
so
very,
sad. It's so
very,
sad and so disheartening. And then those same people, guess what? They failed up.
yeah, it's crazy. It seems like failing up in the government is the way to go, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They want
What's your sense on this new situation we have going on right now with Ukraine and Russia?
oh, man. Let's see, we try to because of 2 minute and 30-second sound bites, it lends itself almost the same way that social media does to division. And
Mm,
social media weaponized, first, not even, I don't think anyway, intentionally weaponized, more of a, hey, how do we get more clicks on this and that to get more advertising dollars? And now we've grown into these huge companies with so much information out there that we can now influence thought, and to keep people clicking, to keep gathering this information. Guess what? Division. That's what does it. That's what keeps these people going back and forth, clicking on
mhm,
things, outraged. And guess what? That's all to the detriment of the country, of just sitting down and having a conversation about these things. And it's gotten so bad that if you question anything that is outside of that 2 minute and 30, what you can cover in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, in order to get a point across, maybe not even one that you want to get across, but a point that will be
mhm,
remembered. So you'll be invited back on that show so you can continue your career. That that's where we find ourselves.
mm,
So when we ask questions about NATO, about promises made, about treaties, about promises implied, if we look back to history, if you ask any of those questions, now all of a sudden you're a Putin supporter or
right.
whatever it is. So
You're just a conspiracy theorist, Trumper, Putin supporter,
yeah,
white
so
supremacist, sexist, all the things.
all the things, all
Yeah.
the things. So once again, it plays back into not being a student of history, not being thoughtful in your approach of thinking in terms of 4-year election cycles, possibly 8-year
Mhm.
election cycles for the really deep thinkers among us. And the military-industrial complex is a real thing. There's a reason that Eisenhower warned about it, and the entire speech is fascinating. People can say just look at that one line, and it was anyway, read the whole speech, watch the whole speech. I
Mm,
highly recommend it. But that does exist in these gigantic bureaucracies. The government is very powerful, and much more powerful, obviously, than our founders ever wanted it to be.
mm,
But that's a long way of saying that even strategically, geopolitically, we're not putting the requisite thought into these different situations so that we can do things that are in the best interests of the United States and by default the world. So there's a lot more to it that can be covered in a 2-minute and 30-second soundbite or a single tweet that someone retweets, typically someone who hasn't put the requisite time, energy, and effort into studying the issue as well. So it's just so sad. And who suffers? Who suffers? Well, right now the Ukrainian people are suffering. Those are they're paying the price for the mistakes of our strategic level leaders, and on both sides. We're not without blame here. Yes, Putin invaded, but there are also some things that we can look at that possibly we could have done better to maybe avoid this outcome. And it's just
Yeah, and it just seems like, obviously, it just seems like we're running out of leverage very quickly because deterrence failed so fast. It and I've been listening to a lot of podcasts on this situation. It fascinates me, and it's so complicated. When you look at it like at a strategic level, maybe what are like a couple things that we should be looking at and how do you handle Putin?
Well, you can look at it from, let's look at geography, let's look at demographics. It's not just those things I mentioned earlier, a treaty, a NATO that's pushing closer to borders, misunderstandings. I mean, Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers, it's I think it came out right around COVID time, or maybe a year before, I forget exactly, but it's about misunderstandings. And it's about misunderstandings at a personal level between two people. But you can also look at that from a different perspective and look at misunderstandings between nation states, and how easy it is. I mean, look at World War One. There are things that happen based on misunderstandings and not being thoughtful about what actions you are going to take, either in response to something, or in the lead up to something. So there's a lot of that. But if you look at geography and demographics, you look at Soviet life expectancy, or sorry, Russian life expectancy from the end of the Soviet Union through today. Well, the life expectancy of a male in Russia is, and we don't have the best data for it, but let's just say 58. That's not great. And then you look at how many have died off over the years from the end of the Soviet Union in particular, up through today. And when you look at those numbers, it points to something very telling in that ethnic Russians are on the decline, and they're on the decline, a very steep decline. And where are most ethnic Russians other than Russia? Ukraine. And you got to look at that history between those two nations. And if you look at it from that point of view, and you look at having only maybe 2 generations left of ethnic Russians, when you look at the numbers, without anything changing, of course, you look at the trajectory, then, well, maybe they feel like their back is against the wall, because if they don't get these ethnic Russians back under the Russian sphere of influence, or actually take the country that has all these ethnic Russians in it, they're dead anyway. And if you look at from that perspective, then you're dealing with an animal that's in the corner, a wounded animal in the corner that's just trying to survive. So you have that piece of it. And then you look at it, hey, in the military over there, they are not going to be able to field the military for much longer. So there was a certain finite amount of time, when you look at the numbers, that they could actually keep a standing military in the field in the numbers that would allow them to go and do what they're doing now in the Ukraine. So there's certainly a lot of that. And then you look at the end of for the fall of the Soviet Union, and everything that happened really from Reagan and Gorbachev talking through the fall of the Berlin Wall, and then going forward through the 90s. So you have to look at all of that, I think, if you want to understand the enemy, which is what our strategic level leaders need to do, especially when they're responsible for making the decisions that send young men and women into battle to lose their lives, lose their arms, lose their legs. They owe it to those people, to those tactical level fighters, to put this kind of thought into the decisions that they're making. So it's there's a lot more to it than a 2-minute and 30-second soundbite.
Yeah. Is World War III something that we should be concerned about as normal civilians? Is that something that you put any thought into? Do you think specifically in this situation, with Putin. Do you think he has the guts to actually do that?
Well, first the question would be, do they have the capability to do
Yeah.
that? The answer to that question is yes, they have that capability. I think they have about 6,000 different
Yikes.
nuclear type of armaments. Some tactical, some on submarines, some
Mm-hmm.
they have a bunch of different types. But so they have the product, they have the capability to
Mm-hmm.
put that to put that weapon where they want to put that weapon. So okay, next question after that would be, well, will they, or
Mm-hmm.
what would cause them to take that action that we want to avoid? And that's the one you have to put a lot of thought into, because you're making decisions now that might make someone use that weapon that
Mm-hmm.
they have, not develop, not think
Right.
about developing, not possibly, that they actually physically have
Mm-hmm.
and can use.
Mm-hmm.
So so that's the kind of thought that you need to put into these sorts of things as a strategist, as an advisor, as a
Mm-hmm.
politician, as a statesman, which are, I don't even know if we have any statesmen anymore. So that's where we are with that. So it's not, is it something that keeps me up at night? It's not something that keeps me wide awake at night, but it's something that's on the table because the capability exists.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and you now have soldiers going into Ukraine. You have a war going on, and one of the weapons in their arsenal happens to be nuclear. So it's
Mm-hmm.
something that needs to be considered.
Yeah. It scares the shit out of me, but like I said, I'm learning on the fly here. It definitely gets thrown around a lot in the mainstream media. It's their go-to kind of fear tactic to I don't know if it's the truth or if it's just to get clicks, but certainly over the last couple months they've made most of us believe that it is a possibility. I mean, obviously it seems like it is, but sometimes I wonder, is this just something that gets tossed around for, because there's so much misinformation going around right now. It's hard to know what's true and what's just put out there as propaganda from every side. I mean, I know Russia's infamous for that, but so are we, and so is everybody. So sifting through this stuff as a person sitting in my seat, and I think a lot of my listeners, is really hard. And you have a lot. I mean, you just can tell you're so knowledgeable of history, and how complex these situations are, that you can probably look at it a little bit more clear eyed. But do you ever find yourself going, "Who the fuck is telling the truth here? Like, what is going on?"
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's even worse today than it was in the past, because it's hard to. There's so much to sift through. There's so much information out there, and there's so much information that is tied to an end result that either a company or a politician wants to get from you. So you're being manipulated by, not just by the event, naturally, but by a politician, by a party, by a news organization, um, to get a certain result out of you. And what is that? What do they want you to do? They want you to click on something. They want you to vote a certain way. They want you to be outraged about something, to add to the discord. What is that? How are you? How are you? So I look at a lot of things out there, most things out there, that are timely as, okay, why? What action do they want me to take by this article, by this 2-minute segment, by
Mm-hmm.
whatever it might be? What do they hope to get from me? What is that response that this person, this organization wants from me? And it's why I tend to revert to history, and studying that history, and then taking a breath and then applying that history to the current event, rather than just being told how I should be feeling about something, or being told a fact, maybe 1 out of 10, that they want me to focus on because they want some sort of a response from me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's not me as an author, that's just me as a citizen. And they want that same thing if you read that article,
Mm-hmm.
or anybody else reads that article. So I try to be as thoughtful as I possibly can about these things, and try to go back to history as much as possible, and then extract the lessons from that history, and then apply those lessons to the current situation or event, or no matter what that is, rather than just being told how I should think about something by someone who wants me to take a certain action.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that's helped me try to understand Putin, uh, there's a Netflix special called "How to Become a Tyrant." I don't know if you've seen that or not.
I have not.
It's actually it's actually really interesting.
I'll check it
My
out.
son and I have, I believe that's what it's called. My son and I have been watching it, but it kind of goes through history's worst tyrants, right? From, Saddam Hussein to the leader of Libya, to all over the place, but and it goes through the steps, and they do it kind of from this tongue-in-cheek kind of perspective. Next, if you want to be a tyrant, you do this: you suppress information. Then you get rid of your descendants.
The how-to
Then,
guide, huh? Yeah.
yeah. But it helped me understand a lot more about what's going on right now, especially when it comes to Russia and the old Soviet Union and all that stuff, because they go over Stalin. And anyways, it's really interesting. You have obviously had the opportunity to travel all over the world and probably see a lot of places that most people will never get to see. Does that give you more perspective on freedom
I
and
think
make you
so.
appreciate it?
I think that's only natural, because you gain an appreciation for what we have back here when you see others who do not have those up. And no matter where you're born, whatever station you're born into, whatever class you're born into, you get to make your own decisions, in this country. And a lot of most places around the world, you don't get to make those decisions for you. Your life is essentially set. So I think that's why travel is so important, just because you gain that perspective. I just had Rick Prado on the podcast the other day on my podcast, and he's a CIA operative who was born in Cuba, before the revolution. And he got to see his first firefight was at age 7, with somebody on the deck of his house. And obviously he wasn't shooting; he was observing. But he got to see the impact of Castro and what happened to Cuba. And then he escaped. He got out of that country. He went to his parents, put him on a plane. He got out of there, and he wound up in an orphanage in the United States. His parents came over later and found him, and then he worked his way into the Central Intelligence Agency and ended up going to Central America and working with the Contras in the 80s, and countering the Soviet and, well, Cuban through the Soviets influence down there. And but he has this appreciation and this love of America because he saw what happens when these rights get taken away, when things are nationalized, when the government gains the amount of power that they did in Cuba through the revolution. And he got to see that firsthand, the impact on his family, the impact on his friends, the impact on his country. And he had to flee that to come here to a place where he could make his own decisions. And the government wasn't impacting you in that sort of a way, that they're taking all that you own and making you essentially a servant of the state. And so he has this appreciation for America because of that. But you can get that from books. You can get that through reading history. You don't have to travel around the world. Of course, it drives it home when you go to these other places and you see it for yourself, and then you come back here and think, "Oh my gosh, I won the lotto by being born in this country." And we're losing a lot of that these days, and social media plays right into that. We're all want to feel victimized or whatever it is. Hey, you have the options and opportunities that no one else in the history of this world has ever had, and you get to do that from a position of having a system, an economy that allows you to grow and thrive based on the decisions that you make. Of course, you're going to get knocked down. That's life, and you're going to have to get back up and keep moving forward. That's life. Or you can just whine about it the entire time. And now there's an industry of people that are out there making a very good living, whining about the options and opportunities that we have in this country that were given to them by people who laid it all on the line from the inception of this country up through today, sacrificed their lives, sacrificed their sacred honor, and some coming back from these wars with in wheelchairs, missing arms, missing legs, dealing with traumatic brain injury, dealing with post-traumatic stress. But they went downrange, or they fought here in the United States early on in the Civil War, so that we could have these options and opportunities, that we have these rights that were God-given, that were natural rights that are enshrined in the Bill of Rights. That's why it was so important. And yet now we have people, politicians, segments of society that want to give up those rights for some reason in return for safety and security, perhaps, or maybe they don't even know why. We have authors, we have journalists, we have media organizations, typically the front line of defense of the First Amendment, actively calling for censorship for things they don't agree with. So I try to remain hopeful, but it's very difficult when you have segments of society that don't appreciate those freedoms that were given to them by people who died, so that they could be here in this country, now calling for censorship.
Right.
Now, and it's a very
And you wonder, have they ever read any history ever? Have like going back to that documentary that I just referenced? What's one of the things is crushing information that goes against your propaganda. That's one of the steps to becoming a tyrant. Like if you just watch that stupid documentary that I watched without knowing anything else about history, if you just watch that, it's like, oh, and then like it's actually scary, man. Like you're like, dude, that happens, that happens, that happens, that happens. It's like, holy crap, we're like making all the same mistakes all over again. And one of the things that I saw you said in another interview, which hit me in the heart, because one of the things that I value the most about my life is freedom. I like, my goals are all structured around freedom to do what I want with my family, freedom, creative freedom, financial freedom, all the freedoms. I love them. And I, I, I think that it seems like your life has been structured around that too. Like when you got out of the service, you you want all those things. You want to be able to write what you want. You want to have enough money to have other experiences with your family and pay your bills and all the things. But you have perspective, and I think my generation is probably just as guilty as everybody else because we were born in the '80s, right after kind of the whole Cold War era, and we had Desert Storm 1 and 2, but which was awful in many ways, but it definitely wasn't comparable to like the World Wars or some other things. So anyways, I think my generation and maybe even the generation after me was super spoiled. We kind of lost some of that perspective. We feel entitled. We feel like things just need to be handed to us. We forget that our grandparents, just like your grandfather, like literally they went through the Depression. They gave their lives in these world wars for like these amazing freedoms that we have, and then all of a sudden we're just gonna shut those down again. Like it just does not make any sense.
I know it's tough. It's a tough time to be sure, and it's that's why that reading is so important. That's why I try to talk about it every chance I get is how important it is to understand your history, understand the history of the world, but understand, hey, why do we have these freedoms? Why were they so important to those who stood up against the largest and most powerful army and navy in the world, so that they could determine their own destiny. And that's what we can do today, no matter where you're born. I mean, we all know people who were born into the lap of luxury, and then just let it all go and just made poor
Dude,
decisions.
most of the time, I see
And
it all the time.
and then you see people who are born with nothing. I mean, Larry Ellison says something, and I love when he says this, but he's fascinating. Obviously, started Oracle. I think he's the sixth richest guy in the world. Fascinating individual. And he says, I was born with all the disadvantages necessary for success. And I love that.
Wow.
Because a lot of people say, oh, I was, my parents didn't have any money, or I did, the X, Y, or Z or whatever. Well, guess what? A lot of people are born into that, and look what they do, because you get to choose.
Yeah, just go spend some time in Southern California, and like my wife and I went to. I'm not bashing on Southern California at all, but we were at my older brother lives in L.A. We were down in Malibu. We went to Nobu, the sushi place, which is unbelievable. And we walked out, and there was all these. There's like a Lambo coming in. There's like all these fancy cars, and I was just people watching there was amazing. And I went back up to my brother's house. I'm like, God, the people watching we just experienced for an hour was unbelievable. I'm from like rural Oregon and Montana. Like I'm not used to that. And he's like, yeah, those are just, I mean, most of those people you're looking at are trust funders. Like they, and nothing against them. Good for them, I guess. But I was like, wow, like that's pretty incredible. I guess I've just never seen anything like that. But to your point, the most successful and people that I've met that I respect the most seem to not have started with it. They appreciate it more.
Yeah, I mean, hey, those people in there, guess what they're doing? They're keeping Nobu going. They're spending some. The economy needs some of that too.
God bless them. I'm not bashing them. I'm just, yeah.
Yeah. But then, yeah, a lot of people start with nothing. Some of the richest and quote unquote most successful people in the world have really started with not that much, and then built these amazing companies, and ended up where they are through hard work and through having the opportunity to make their own decisions.
Do you ever think we should that the United States should make it mandatory to serve?
I used to not think so when I was growing up, and then I saw and talked to a lot of people from Israel, from other countries that have some sort of service, and I think that we would be a stronger country for it, because we would share something with one another, no matter of the station in life that you're born into, no matter what your religion is, no matter what your race is, whatever. We'd share something, and that thing that we would share is that we contributed to this country that gives us these opportunities. And without that, you don't share much in common, other than that maybe you were born here or you were a citizen, became a citizen. Okay. But you don't share anything other than that. But if you had some sort of service, whether it was military, whether it was law enforcement, whether it was firefighter, whether it was, a Forest Service type of whatever it is, that now we share something. And if you wanted to be a wildland firefighter for 2 years or a year or whatever that was, and I wanted to be in the military, or I wanted to volunteer with special needs kids, or I wanted to help with a homeless situation, or whatever it was, guess what? Now we've all contributed, and we share the fact that we all contributed somehow to this thing called the United States of America. So without that, there are very few things that bond us together. And if there are, which should be things like the Constitution, like our history, that sort of a thing. But we don't think of those terms much anymore. But if you had something that was tangible, something that was physical, something that you had to put a sweat equity into, now you appreciate it a little more. I have a bond with you, even though I don't know you, X person on the street. But guess what? We share this bond because I know that 10 years ago, you had to put in your year or your 2 years, and you did something. And same thing with me. I had to put in my 2 years, even though we were separated by maybe even a generation or a decade or whatever it is. We have a bond, and we both put in sweat equity somehow to this nation. So I think there are a lot of benefits to it now when I really think about it.
Well, I have one more question for you, but before I forget, thank you for your service. Appreciate it. What advice would you give people? You've created an amazing life. Congratulations. I'm so stoked for you, man. Like all the time, I'm rooting for you, and you don't need me rooting for you, but I'm just stoked about it. I love seeing people be successful and creating their own life.
Appreciate it, brother. Dude, that's I sincerely appreciate that. It means more than you know.
Yeah. What advice would you give to the people that are listening to this, that are teetering on the edge of kind of trying to blaze their own trail, whether they're unhappy at their job or they're getting out of the service? Like, do you have just top of mind advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I mean, you have to do it. You have to put in that work, regardless of what it is. And yeah, it gets harder probably the older you get, the more responsibilities you have, spouse, children, whatever it might be, health issues, whatever that might be. But eventually, you're going to have to figure out how to either balance it, how to prioritize, and go after what you want. Start building it, whether that's 10 minutes a day, or 30 minutes a day, or an hour a day, or it's a hard reset and walking out of that job and moving on. And it's going to be different for everybody. That's why you can't give like a blanket level, hey, you just do this, because everyone's situation is different. But know that you can make decisions. And yeah, it might not be. And this is where social media isn't the greatest, in that you only see that single second snapshot of someone's day, and you don't get all the rest of that day. And it's meant, even mine, I try to be open and honest and share everything. But I'm not taking my worst part of the day and putting that up there. I'm putting things that are positive.
Would be an interesting social media account for someone to do.
I mean, I think people do that. But that's not typically how we're programming, right, or how we're using it. And it's great in that it can be inspirational. It can be aspirational as a brand, but at the same time, it can be discouraging, because you're not getting the full picture, regardless of how someone tries to paint it on there. And sometimes if people try to paint some of the worst parts of their day, it looks like they're complaining and whining. So it's a weird thing. So I don't think you can put that much stock in it. But even if you're on there just a little bit, you're still getting the best parts of someone's day. And if you're looking at someone with a gazillion followers and tons of money and all that stuff, and you're seeing their car and all that, it might be discouraging. So you can't put too much stock in that one photo, because their personal life might be a disaster. It might be, I mean, who knows, whatever. Don't spend too much time thinking about that. But think about the path forward, think about what you want to do, that mission and that passion. Those are the two things right there, and figuring out what those are for you. So you can't just run off without knowing what those are, what your passion is, and what your mission in life is. So you have to really figure it out. And some people have a hard time figuring it out because they didn't listen maybe to a call early on, to a natural call to something, whether that's to service or that's to building a company or that whatever it might be. I don't know. But for me, it was to join the military, to serve my country in uniform, and to write thrillers. Like those, I heard those callings and I followed.
You're very lucky, man. You're very lucky. Not in the annoying sense, but like that. You're a very lucky man. When can we expect the Chris Pratt series to come out, and where can we see it?
July 1st, coming to Amazon Prime Video. All 8 episodes are, could probably change, but they're all scheduled right now to drop at once. So you can binge it on July 1st. And it's looking good. Got the teaser still has to come out. There's been a first glimpse, like a 15-second little video, but there's the teaser's coming out, and then the trailer, and then the series. So those are all.
That's so exciting, man. Are you nervous? I mean, you're nervous, excited, all the things?
I didn't really, not until you mentioned it right here. I nervous. I didn't really have time to be nervous. But I guess I just understand that some people are going to hate it no matter what. And I can't let that, or some people are going to love the book and then look for the things that are different.
Those people are annoying. Don't worry about them.
Yeah, as soon as they see something different in the show, they're gonna be like, different.
The book's better.
It's gonna be different. It's gonna be different. You're telling a story visually over 8 hours rather than over on the written page. So there are gonna be differences, and then there are gonna be some things that are the same. And for me, and for Chris, and for Antoine, the most important part was keeping those themes, keeping that primal, visceral nature of the story, and having that really weave itself through the entire series. So so I guess it's all just like anything else. It's all up to the person that's watching, if they want to try to find something that's different and wrong and then discount the whole thing. But for me, we kept the important elements, and I love how it came out. And I trusted Chris and trusted Antoine, and that's really what you do when you create something and you turn it over to somebody else to then put it into their format. And that's just how it goes. But I love it, and I could not be more thrilled that it's coming out on July 1st. So
and when's the new book coming out? Can you
May 17th, In the Blood, right there is. I describe that as a sniper-centric novel of violent resolutions, and that's
love it, dude. Congratulations on everything you've created. Thank you for your service. What an amazing life to be inspired by. Everyone, read Jack's books, watch the series, do all the things, and I think the most important lesson of this whole podcast is we all need to do a better job of reading history.
Try to do that, and then take a breath and
have fun too.
Do things in a thoughtful way. I think that's probably the best advice I can give.
Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me on.
Let's do this again.
I hope so. I'll see you in person soon. Before too long.
We got to get outside and go hunt something sometime.
I know we got to get a field. I know it's been too long. So. Man, yeah, fired up for everything you have going on, and hopefully we'll meet up soon.
Let's do it, buddy. Well, thanks for tuning into the Altitude Show today. Make sure to get out and support those that support this show. GoHunt.com, PeaksEquipment.com. Also, you can support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe there and leave a 5-star review. Nothing less than 5 stars. We'll see you next week with a new guest. Have a great day, everyone.